Perverse violence against children, a dark secret of the upper class.
Since
2016, the Independent Commission for Investigating and Analyzing Child Sexual Abuse has been investigating extent, nature and consequences of child sexual abuse in the Federal Republic of Germany and in the former German Democratic Republic. Currently, the Commission is concentrating its investigative activities on abuse of children and teens in the field of sports, in sports clubs, for example. Chairwoman Sabine Andresen complained, however, that dealing with cases of child sexual abuse in sports is still widely a taboo. Demands were made for more drop-in and call centers for abused children and young people. One might think, well, that's a good thing in itself, or is it just scratching the surface of the problem? Because child abuse also exists in other fields. It exists in the film industry, in the music industry, in churches, in schools, in families, children's homes, and in clinics. Examples are child prostitution, production of child pornographic films, and sadism. The worst acts, ritual abuse, child sacrifice, and cannibalism, are carried out in satanic circles. The horrific descriptions of victims and witnesses presented in this program are meant to be understood as a cry for help. Only when the public learns about these horrific crimes, change can occur.
Systematic cases of abuse have unfortunately existed for a long time, and in many countries. Here's just a small selection. Belgium. In 1996, the Belgian Marc Dutroux was arrested. He had kidnapped and raped several girls. 4 of them died in the basement dungeon of his house. During the dragging out of the trial for several years, 27 witnesses died who could have provided evidence that Dutroux was not a lone perpetrator but part of an extensive network of politicians, high judicial officials, managers, industry leaders and others. Witness Regina Luff, long thought to be the only survivor, provided irrefutable evidence. One of the perpetrators was an investigating magistrate whom she had identified as an accomplice in the murder of her baby. However, Regina Luff's statements had no legal consequences. Austria. From the 1950s to the 1980s, around 100,000 children and adolescents in Austria were severely abused and mistreated in both state and church-run homes. Both boys and girls had to be of sexual service to their caretakers and were rented out to child molesters. A commission examined testimonies of mass rapes, and one child is even said to have died. Switzerland. Basel Zodiac. A pedocriminal ring from the so-called better circles of Basel, academics, lawyers, doctors and businessmen, abused underage boys at sadistic sex parties since about the 1960s. International connections to Spain and Thailand were proven. Portugal. From the 1960s onwards, children from the Lisbon orphanage Casa Pia were fed to an elite network of politicians, businessmen, military leaders and media stars, and abused for many years. The judicial process was dragged out for years, and many of the suspects were ultimately not charged. Great Britain. Westminster Dossier, Elm Guest House. Numerous revelations uncovered an extensive pedocriminal network involving the highest levels of government in the 1970s and 80s. Children in institutions were raped and in some cases even murdered. Evidence was extensively destroyed. Links to the British royal family, government, parliament, judiciary, police, intelligence services and media were revealed. USA. From 2001 to 2018, billionaire Jeffrey Epstein ran a sex trafficking ring. He ran a private island where celebrities had sex with minors. According to witnesses, Bill Clinton and Britain's Prince Andrew were seen there, amongst others.
Pedocriminal networks also in Germany.
The activity of numerous pedocriminal networks also became apparent in Germany. Saxony Swamp. Mandy Kopp testified that in the early 1990s, as a 16-year-old, she was held captive with other girls in an underage brothel, where she was raped and abused by judges, lawyers, and real estate agents. Coco Berthman was rented out as a child over several years to pedocriminal networks, abused and tortured. The perpetrators included police officers, lawyers, doctors, and teachers. Her older sister was killed after an attempt to escape. In 2009, Coco Berthman managed to escape herself at the age of 15. Berlin abuse scandal. From the early 1970s until 2003, foster children in Berlin were given to sex offenders. The network of pedocriminals reached far up into official circles. According to an expert report, there were many supporters and confidants in the children's welfare offices, the administration, the Free University, and the Max Planck Institute. The documentary, Life in Hell, describes in a frightening way how children were abused and tortured as part of satanic rituals at the Webelsburg Castle. The most important witness, Nikki, reports to have been present at ritual child sacrifices. According to Nikki, it was a larger, organized group of perpetrators who carried out such practices from 1961 to 1997.
As long as society doesn't accept that it's the gentlemen in the white vests who are involved in this and that they have the network and we don't, nothing will change. Renate Rennebach, former member of the German Bundestag and founder of the Foundation for Victims of Ritual Violence.
Child abuse. Strong reluctance to clarify.
Criminal investigators who want to solve cases of abuse often face significant reluctance. This is what John Wedger, a British investigator for Scotland Yard, discovered when he tried to uncover the abuse of at least 34 children. He was threatened. Several times they tried to put him in prison and take his children away. He did not get a salary for 3 years and almost lost his livelihood. Nevertheless, he continued his investigation. Subsequently, a pedocriminal network was uncovered in which the popular BBC presenter Jimmy Savile was entangled. Former US Senator John DeCamp also experienced massive opposition as he wanted to expose the Franklin scandal, a scandal involving influential men in industry, politics, media, and even law enforcement who raped and killed minors across the United States. Before he could bust the child molester ring, he was killed in a plane crash. Gary Caradori, a private investigator trying to uncover the Franklin scandal, was killed also in a plane crash.
The truths we least like to hear are those we most need to know. Chinese proverb.
False memory. Devious psychotrick makes victims appear untrustworthy.
Between 1987 and 1990, the first cases of child sexual abuse by Hollywood music and media people came to public attention. From this point on, the numerous statements of the victims could no longer be kept under wraps with the usual cover-up measures. Due to this, beginning in the USA, the lie was spread that the children who had described such horrific offenses had only done so because they had been influenced to do so by their psychologists and psychiatrists. The psychological term false memory syndrome was created. It was claimed that the therapists had implanted false memories in clients. Significantly, in an interview with the Dutch pedophile newspaper Pijdica, psychologist Ralph Underweger, one of the founders of False Memory Syndrome Foundation, stated that pedophilia is a responsible choice, and sex with children can be seen as part of God's will. The invention of the false memory syndrome thus proves to be an extremely cunning and a very effective strategy of pedocriminal activists so that they can continue to commit crimes against children without being prosecuted.
Ritual violence. Testimonies of therapists.
Already for the past 30 years, numerous psychotherapists and psychiatrists have been reporting clients who have astonishingly endured similar methods of torture. This starts from drug administration and goes through live burial, waterboarding, rape, ritual impregnation, sodomy, sacrifice, and even cannibalism. Professional conferences of therapists have long since proven that these are by no means isolated cases. Rather, these cases now increasingly represent a burning problem in the practices of German therapists. The lawyer Dr. Marcel Polte proves that there are satanic cults in the background of our society. In the affected families over generations, children repeatedly experience the most severe forms of abuse and torture and have to participate in sacrifices. The children are very soon turned into perpetrators, which means that they themselves have to learn to kill others. When they are older, sometimes even their own newborn baby. Out of guilt, most surviving witnesses of these occult practices remain silent, especially since they also have to fear that they will not be believed or that they will be killed by cult members. The cases that have come to light in therapists' offices and police stations thus only reveal the tip of the iceberg.
Peak of cruelty. Snuff videos.
In a snuff film, people, often children, are tortured to death on camera. Cannibalism is also not uncommon. Physical and mental cruelties are committed, which most people cannot even imagine. Some victims are forced to watch or even have to become perpetrators themselves, and only a few survivors escape the system. Because their experiences are so horrific, and they themselves often have split personalities due to the torture they've endured, survivors are often not believed, especially when they mention the names of the often highly respected perpetrators. These perpetrators get high on the suffering of the children, and at the same time, they earn a lot of money with it because snuff films are sold at horrendous prices on the dark net. This is where abysmal depths open up. What kind of people watch such videos? The Belgian Annika Lucas was a victim of that infamous Belgium child molester network around the Marc Dutroux case in the 90s.
And then my time had come. At the age of 11, I was about to be killed. I was tortured because someone who had protected me for a while and then abused me really badly was done with me. I was strapped to a butcher's block. That was black from the blood of all the children that had come before me. I was there for a few hours. My body is full of scars, and every scar reminds me of the moment. I thought that I was going to be killed like all the children that weren't loved enough to live. And I was going to be forgotten as well. And I wasn't ready to die. Someone from inside that network loved me enough to rescue me. That torture lasted a few hours. However, I was in that network for 5 years and a half. In that time, I was raped many, many, many times. I don't have any scars to show how many times I was raped, but I did the math. Usually it was a whole night in the weekend. And so I gathered that I was actually raped, for about 6 hours a week, 1,716 hours of rape, before I reached the age of 12.
It was only by luck that she survived this horror, and now she urgently warns.
If we are to survive as a species, the world must be willing to confront the darkness of child molester networks.